Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel where I do my best to try and make the invisible visible. So, what subject do we want to cover today about invisibility? What's going on? I think I might as well do this every once in a while. I don't do it that often. Kind of go over current events, where it's this Monday, so maybe every Monday I'll do this. Go over current events, what it means in the group collective level, and what's going on underneath the surface at the spiritual level that is creating that. Because everything that you see out there is actually being created from the spiritual. Spiritual creates the physical. Everything starts from source, goes through our creative cycle, and then manifests itself in the physical, right? Everything is created from God and goes back to God. There isn't anything that's separate from God. If you believe that there is, then you don't believe in God, right? God is omnipresent, omnipotent, everything, right? Everything comes from source and goes back to source. And if you don't believe that, then I haven't seen any evidence in this reality or any other reality to believe that anything that doesn't come from me doesn't come back to me. If I'm throwing out a bunch of negativity, I'll get negativity in return. If I'm producing, and if we look at anything objectively, everything comes from and goes back to one point, which is why it's easy for me to see that. Okay, so let's think about what's going on in the group collective. Let's look at, okay, so we've got conflicts kind of arising around the globe, right? We've got people mashing against borders all over the place. Why is that happening? Well, we have a constriction in the flow of energy. Anytime you have the energy, if energy starts slowing down in the body, parts of the body start to cannibalize itself, right? If you're not moving energy in the body will start cannibalizing itself. And so we're witnessing that around the globe. You've got things starting to cannibalize themselves because it's not moving energy. For example, Russia is being, by many countries, there's embargoes against Russia, and so people aren't trading with Russia. So Russia is actively trying to, try to figure out how they can capitalize on resources where in the past that they had neutral grounds with, like Ukraine. If you guys know the history of that, long history of that, Ukraine decided to side with NATO, and so that became, if you have a country next to a country with you that's siding with one of your enemies, that country becomes your enemy. And if it's violating a prior agreement, then right, that's why that's happening. So, what are you creating? And we're not creating as much as a society. In the United States, our gross national product is way down, which means that we're not creating as much together, which means that the relationships between us are growing more dysfunctional if there's less creativity. That's just a fact, right? If we are less creative as a culture, that means our relationships between one another are lessening because we can't come to agreements on what we want to create together. I can create a YouTube channel, but if 100% of us are just creating YouTube videos, you're not getting any water to drink. You got no utilities. Nobody's building houses. Nobody's taking care of your air conditioning because they're on a YouTube video. Right? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, eventually, spiritualism and being healed is going to move towards a constructed society. Now, I just had a conversation with somebody about this. There have been examples of small societies that try to become more holistic, right? You've got little microcosms, a place next to Nepal or Nepal in and of itself. There's small communities around the globe that have, created a pretty, good community. Iceland is one. A lot of people love Iceland, and Iceland is pretty self-sustaining. They actually kicked the banks out in 2008 when the banks tried to come after housing that they claim were theirs, and like, no, you guys don't lend anybody any money. We already know how this works. We don't owe you jack, and they kicked them out. And so Iceland actually took control of their own economy after 2008, and if they didn't, they were IMF, International Monetary Fund, would end up taking control a lot more than what they had a right to. I mean, the reality is they have no right to anything, right? Only what you give them, because they're not lending you anything. They're lending you your credit back to you, if you guys understand that. Anyway, that's besides the point. So the whole system that we've built upon is because it's based on that, because there's a giant entity that's feeding off of the energy between you and I, or the currency. As long as you, now, currency in and of itself isn't bad, right? It's when you are forced to use somebody else's currency, now you're giving them control over the energy between you and I. Now, some people say, well, how do you fix that? Well, we've got decentralized currencies. But if anybody has a right to more of that currency than somebody else, then, right? I mean, as soon as a new one pops up, and this is why there's so many now. As soon as a new one pops up, you've got somebody that has a lot of wealth that finds a way to get the majority of it to control that currency. Screwed. I mean, now they can control the pricing. So now we don't want to use it anymore. The only true currency that we have, and this is true in nature, the only currency that we have is time. Time moves energy. And every function of time describes how much energy you can move. Higher frequency, higher number of times, you're moving more energy. That's why they say raise your frequency, because you're actually moving more energy. You're moving less energy when your frequency is lower. Time. The amount of money that you have has nothing to do with time, because everybody in this reality seems to weigh their time differently. Right? I am not going to weigh my time. What would be the point? Anyway, so what you're creating, and this is a message that I get from Spirit all the time, don't ever feel like your time is wasted with anybody, because the time that you put into each other, you'll get back. Even if the time only lasts a month or a week or 6 months or a year, it doesn't matter how long it is, that's not wasted time. It can be too easy to believe that that's wasted time, but it's not. We're learning from all of our experiences, and as long as you're doing your best to try and give a really positive effort into the time that you spend with other people, you'll get that back in some way. It might not come from that person, it might come from somebody else. It's never wasted. Don't ever believe that your time is wasted. That's the hardest thing to overcome. I'll be the first one to tell you that that's one of the hardest lessons for me to understand, is that your time is never wasted. Don't ever believe your time is wasted. It's all part of you. And so give it unselfishly. That is one of the fundamental hiccups of what we see, right? I was having a conversation with somebody who helps with lending today, and lenders are trying to, they call themselves lenders, but they're not. They're lending you your credit back to you, right? And then they're judging you according to your history as far as how good your credit is. They're trying to prevent risk by evaluating how much currency you're moving, right? And their system, right? Into that control grid. Because there's currency in the control grid, and how much of that is coming back to you, determining on what kind of lucrative investment you are, right? Making sure that you have some kind of positive balance and a monthly increasing balance, or at least you're stabilized, right? You've got an amount of money that you're holding on to that is stable. Now, more and more of the population, because we're not creating as much, less gross national product, which means you got to pump more currency in there. Inflation rises, which means a higher percentage of the population can't afford their basic needs, and they're not being creative anyway. We see evidence of this as a much higher portion of the population are buying into escapism. Drugs, gaming. Gaming is escapism, right? We escape our reality by just jumping onto gaming. We're not creating anything. We're creating games, new games. I mean, it's one of the biggest markets there are, right? I mean, how big of a market is Epic Games? I think they're the creators of Fortnite. I played Fortnite when it first came out. Not anymore, thank God. It's just wasted. You're just wasting your time. But how much energy is going into something like that, or Ubisoft, or any of the other big companies? I encourage you guys to look. I mean, some of the biggest multi-billion-dollar companies are gaming companies, right? Software companies and hardware that supports the software are the two biggest markets in this world right now. Data centers. Amazon, Google, Microsoft. They're throwing all their money into data centers to control information or control time. Time is information. So whoever's controlling the information controls the energy. Think about it that way. So this YouTube channel is going through a data center somewhere. There's nothing I can do about it. If they decide that they don't like the information that I'm spewing, they control the information, right? There's no decentralized information network. Theta was one of the ones that tried to get off the ground, but the Theta network never did because it's kind of complicated for people to use. It's pretty easy for me just to record a video and upload it on YouTube. So decentralized data and information is important for a healthy society, but I don't think we're going to get to a healthy society until we heal the heart. Now, how do we heal the heart? This is what's happening on the inside of everybody, which is why all this stuff's happening, right? From the outside, it looks like the organism is dying. If you were to monitor it, conflicts are arising, flaring up, right? You have inflammation everywhere because it's feeding on itself. That's what happens when your body breaks into a fever, right? It looks like it's breaking down. It's feeding on itself. The reality, and it is, but that's how you're pushing dead cells out of the body. If the cells are dying, you got to push them out of the body. So how do you do that? You do it at the individual level first. You're pushing old thought forms out of the body, out of the mind, like I can't, things like I can't do this, or I can't be self-supporting. I have to go to work for this company over here, or I'm going to die, right? It's always comes out of fear of death, right? There's this fear that you create in the mind of what could possibly happen if you decide to do something for yourself instead of doing something for somebody else, literally, or working for somebody else's creation. If you're not creating for yourself, you're not healing the self. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are creating for themselves. And the creators are the healthiest, most prosperous people out there, right? People that are creating from their heart space, or creating from their imagination, or working with a group of people who are creating from their imagination. Pixar Entertainment. The most successful creator probably of all time, Cameron, right? Get Terminator, the Avatar series. Avatar is the best-selling movie of all time, right? I mean, that guy is hands down probably one of the most successful creators in the world in our recent history. Stephen King is one, right? When you go to books, that creative talent, the creative imagination, but it's all built on escapism, right? It's always building something that's telling a story that really people can resonate with and they identify with because it's really happening under the surface in our reality. Dune is an excellent example. Dune 1 and 2, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today about second Dune. Dune 2 is the most prophetic movie I've ever seen because it talks about harnessing our light and dark side and realizing that none of us are different from one another. We all have desires. The only thing that creates an unhealthy society is when we stand in judgment of one another and stop creating together because of it. That was the fall of the hippie movement, right? They tried to fall out of non-judgment and unconditional love, but they didn't create anything together. It was all about sex and drugs. But I mean, basically my end goal of this conversation is to encourage you guys that there's healing going on under the surface, and it gets forced when people realize that we need to co-create together instead of paying each other to do things for one another, right? If I need to pay you money to create something that I want to create, then we're not co-creating. I'm just using your God to control you, because whatever your God is will control you. What's your God? Simple question. What is your God? What are you controlled by? Would you do anything for money? I can tell you what my God is, and it's our hearts, right? Whatever is going to make our hearts grow closer. And that's always going to be connecting with people who want to give their time and energy without any expectation of what they might receive from it. And it's really hard to master yourself in that way, because but eventually you'll start to learn that you'll get what you need when you need it, and to be grateful for everything that you have. The scales are always balanced, whether we realize it or not. The scales are always balancing themselves, and we're all getting what we need when we need it, and to be grateful for those things. It's been too easy for me personally to not be grateful at times when I should have been. I mean, I have so much to be grateful for, I can't even explain to you how much I have to be grateful for. I've always had a roof over my head. I've always had people that cared for me. But the only reason was because I cared, and I know this in my heart, that I've tried to do the best that I can for the people around me. And sometimes I have to prioritize myself if I'm not feeling right? And we all have to do that, and that's okay. But don't ever think, the states that we're in are always temporary. Sometimes if you feel bad, it's temporary. If you feel good, it's probably temporary. Right? I don't know. I just want to give this general forecast of our state of reality, and how we won't see heaven on earth until the earth is cleansed. I mean, that's just the way it is, right? For one thing, and this is something that I thought about, let's say I want to create a healthy society, right? I want to build decentralized decision-making software where we're making decisions as a whole, as a group. How do you deal with people who are attacking their environment or just purely consuming, right? Consuming more energy than they're giving to the people around them. And they're not giving openly and being open to receive. If consuming energy, your primary goal is to feed your lower three chakras instead of, providing from your top chakras and being open to receive at the bottom side, right? How do you solve that issue, right? Well, until you have divine law in place that is from a time standpoint is fairly accurate, then society will feel like they need to keep locking people in boxes to keep them from feeding off their environment, right? Thieves, murderers, people that are actively harming themselves by harming their environment. The need is to isolate them to make sure that they can't continue to do that. And if they do that, they're doing it to other people that would do the same to them. Right? That's why we build prisons. The only way that we're ever going to get out of that is when we have an environment that actively reflects the state of your heart to kill you much faster until you've healed yourself, to where you can become more of a creator and create positive energy for your environment, rather than just feel like you have the right to own somebody's time and control somebody else's time. The biggest example I've ever seen of that is, of course, the story of Moses, right? Let my people go. And the thing that's I realized about the story of Moses, and why I'm pretty sure that Moses wrote Job, is because Job is like the other side of the coin of the story of Moses, where Job didn't blame anybody else. Job loved everybody. He hated himself because he knew he was his own worst enemy. It was true. And he didn't really get out of it until he forgave himself and let the past go, sacrificed that old part of himself. And then at the end of that book, there is no God and the devil, right? God and the devil are at the beginning because Job's dual-minded. At the ending, he's of one mind. He sees that God describes himself as the Leviathan at the end of Job. The only place in the Bible where you're going to find it. I mean, would you describe Moses as the Leviathan? He's the one that stated the plagues. Never hated the Pharaoh. Pharaoh had every opportunity to heal his heart and let the people go. But the Leviathan was unleashed on him because he refused to heal his heart and let people go. Right? Really powerful story. The story of Moses is powerful on so many different levels. You know, and he was only able to do that once he saw the burning bush, the I am that I am. A bush that consumes itself and keeps growing. It's eating itself constantly. The old is, and before you can create something new, something old has to go away. You have to push something out before you can create something new. So the consuming energy of the Leviathan is just as important as the creator. As soon as you move away from pure creative energy, there has to be a purely consuming energy to balance it out. And that's within each of us. We have to have the ability to destroy, or else we'll never be able to create. And so a divine law is always in effect. But if we keep creating the same thing over and over, eventually it will be consumed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, because we're working in short and longer cycles. And actually, when you're looking at the long cycles, you're just seeing our higher self, the bigger organism, getting rid of the old and getting ready to put something new in place. And that's happening individually, and it's spreading around the globe. So I think I'm done. Yeah, I think I've spoken enough about that. I'll let you guys stew on that for a while. Think about, how is it that, do you feel like you should work on being more creative yourself, or maybe partnering with somebody to help them create something and you guys could create something together as a group? You never know. Who knows where we're going? But I encourage you to do that. Figure out what you guys can create, and then be open to receive. Don't expect to get anything from it. Just create something new. And it'll be a learning process about you and the people around you, and probably how well you're able to get along with each other and surrender to each other's needs, and just respect and love one another unconditionally without standing in judgment, because we're all at different points and different times for different reasons. Sometimes we get to spend a long time together. Sometimes we only get to see each other for little snippets of time. But I encourage you to value that time as much as you can, and be thankful for the time that you get to spend with one another. I know I have with you. So, love you. Have a beautiful day.